name's Jill Hopkins, and I chair the National Propane Gas Association Women in Propane Business Council, which is hosting you this afternoon. And I'm also a member of the MPGA Conventions Committee, which qualifies me to make the introductions today. So again, welcome, and thank you for being here. First of all, I would like to start by thanking AmeriGas, the sponsor for our speaker this afternoon, and Apex Energy for sponsoring the video, which will make this presentation available after this afternoon. It's my honor to present to you Dr. Liz Selzer, President and CEO of the Mentor Leadership Team and author of 3G Mentoring, a relational strategy for working with generational distinctions, global diversity, and gender differences. Dr. Selzer is an expert on mentoring and will share with us today some immediately applicable principles of mentoring that will enable us and our organizations to realize our full potential. Mentoring is proven to enhance employee engagement, reduce turnover, improve communication, and increase motivation, all leading to higher performance of ourselves, our employees, and our businesses. Dr. Selzer in this session will teach us how to do this by using this powerful tool. At this point, I introduce you to Dr. Liz Selzer.
Welcome. So, mentoring is a huge waste of time. At least that's what I thought as I was sitting in the back of a classroom and I was being told that in order to get my master's degree at the time, I had to not just find one mentoring partner, I had to find two. Are you kidding me? I was a busy young mom. I had young kids. I had a husband that traveled all the time. Ridiculous, I thought. I was angry, really angry about this. But as life would have it, I couldn't graduate without finding those two mentoring partners. Fast forward to the end of my master's degree at the time, and I had become such a fan because I was realizing that all this book learning that I was doing, and I did it well, wasn't really all that helpful in real life. And these mentors helped me apply all of the things that I was learning in my master's degree to what I was actually doing in my job and in my work. And I thought, okay, I get this now. Yes, it does take some time, but it's also a fabulous thing and a great way to learn. Better than other things. Fast forward, by the end I was actually writing articles on the benefits of mentoring. Fast forward again to when I'm looking at getting my PhD, which I got in education and looking at training and performance improvement, and I studied mentoring. And I actually have a published study based on that research on how effective mentoring is for long-term learning. Fast forward again, I have now just completed training on mentoring on 6 continents. And what I have found is it works. Across culture, across generation, across gender. It works. It will help your businesses and it will help you professionally and personally. And we're going to look at why. Now you guys have been handed this, it's called a white paper, which is funny because it's actually colored, but I think originally they're supposed to be white, but I thought it was kind of boring to be in a white paper form. So anyway, that is going to give you all the statistics that I have up here and actually even more. So just in case you're wondering, don't worry about writing any of that stuff down because it's right in that paper. But I wanted you to get the real nuts and bolts of why this matters. It's not just some big touchy-feely thing that makes us all feel good. Oh, I'm in a mentoring relationship and they tell me I'm awesome. It's not about that. It's actually a very proven learning strategy and a way to help with professional development, not only for yourself, but in your organizations. How many of you guys are experiencing turnover, empty chairs in your organizations? You know, is retention an issue for you guys at all? Finding talent to fill those chairs. That's kind of what I had heard. So retention and finding talent is one of the greatest things about mentoring. It will help you do that. What about the difference between the two generations? Are any of you experiencing a little bit of that with the really young people in your organizations, and then there's the older folk like myself, and there's some clashes going on there? Have anybody noticed a little bit of that? Places, okay? We're all different. And that is why mentoring is so amazing, because it allows us to see how different perspectives can bring different attributes and learning to every situation that you're a part of. People that actively engage diversity do better in business. They're more innovative, creative. They can see things coming better. They can identify problems better. Again, all supported by research. So one of the things that will help you work with people that you don't necessarily, they're not just like you. It's hard sometimes. Mentoring can help with that whole process as well. So today, we're going to understand the importance and benefits of a mentoring program. I'm going to tell you just some stories and some facts about that. Become familiar with the process and expectations. And then we're going to learn about the basic skills needed for mentees and mentors. Now, I will say that trying to do all this in an hour and 15 minutes is a little crazy, so I'm not going to actually call this a training as much as you will learn some good information that you can apply. But I can't actually do exercises with you, unfortunately, in only an hour and 15 minutes. And I want to leave some time at the end for questions. But if a question comes up as we're talking, feel free to raise your hand. I'm very happy to just address it at the moment. Okay? So first of all, let's look at the benefits for the mentor. So a lot of people think, oh, what does the mentor get out of it? They get stuff out of it. That's the cool thing. I mean, it's not just you giving back, which feels good, but it's actually good for you to be a mentor. For the mentor, first of all, you leave a legacy. And I know with the propane industry, there are a lot of people that know a lot that are retiring. And that information and that knowledge and that understanding are going to go away. And you can write it down in a ledger, you can write it down somewhere, or maybe you've told some people about it. But if you're actively in a mentoring relationship, you are leaving that legacy in human beings. Much better than a book on a shelf. Much better than it just going away and nobody knowing about it. Think about that. I still talk to some of my mentors. I still talk about all of my mentors. 2 of them are deceased. They live in me because I tell people about what I learned from them. And by the way, it's not just technical stuff. It's important life stuff that matters, that has impacted me and made me a better person and a better professional. And that lives in me. And believe me, I tell anyone who will listen, you'll hear about some of them today. I have talked about my mentors now, like I said, on 6 continents. Think about that. That's the kind of legacy. Besides, you're leaving a good legacy of learning and helping someone. Just the whole giving back, I think there's something to that. We work. And yes, we make the money. And yes, we do have a good business. But there's that point where we say, is that really all there is? Isn't there something else? And by the way, I'm not suggesting that you have to be old to mentor, because you don't. You can mentor today, right now. There are things that you know that you can share with someone else that will help them. So this applies to all of you. Don't think, oh, I'm not old enough to mentor yet. You are. Yes, you are. And then learning. All of the times that I have mentored, I know I have learned more from my mentees than I think they've learned from me. I mean, it's such a beautiful situation, and it's I have to show you, I have a, phone, right? My mentee at one time, and I know this is shocking because now everybody's used to texting, but back when texting first came out, I was like, what is that? Why not just pick up the stupid phone? Why are you sending a text message? This makes no sense to me. But she was like, Liz, I'm going to show you how to do it. So part of my issue was just not knowing how. So she literally took my hands, put it on my phone, showed me how to text do text. And honestly, now I probably wouldn't have half the interaction with my kids if I didn't know how to text. I mean, it's embarrassing, but true. So anyway, learning is another thing. Now, what about for the mentee? Typically this is where most of us can kind of see where it's going to be beneficial. It's beneficial for learning, okay? Learning all kinds of things. Technical stuff, strategic stuff, character building stuff, professional development stuff. One of the other things that mentees can learn, and especially in family-owned businesses like many of you are part of, there is an organizational culture. There is a way of doing things. That if someone from the outside comes into your organization, they're not going to necessarily know that's the way you do things. And they will quickly be unsuccessful if they aren't mentored into that process. I had a situation where we had been looking for a marketing person at a company that I worked for a long time. I was part of the executive team, and we'd been looking for her and for this person, and it ended up being a lady. So we took her in, and she started work. Well, she had come from a publishing house. And at that publishing house, they started their business day maybe about 10 o'clock. Maybe got to their meetings 11, 12, worked till 6, 7, 8 at night, but that was the corporate culture she had come from. Well, the company I worked for, we were in there by 7. We had started our meetings by 8 and were pretty much ready for lunch by the time she was walking in the door. Now, what do you think our impression of her was? Not real positive. Everybody thought she never worked. Gosh, she shows up late every day. Now, she was there later than anyone else, but we didn't see that because we were leaving by our 5 o'clock time frame. So we didn't know. The other thing was our company had this organizational cultural thing of keeping our doors open, especially if you were in management, because we always wanted people to be able to come in and talk to us if there was an issue. Well, remember, publishing house. A lot of what people were doing was they were reading manuscripts and stuff. They needed to have their doors shut. So that was what she was coming from, doors shut. So not only was she coming in late, but then her door was shut. We didn't even know she was in there. And so, and again, I'm pointing the fingers right back at me. I could have helped her out. I could have mentored her. I could have told her some of that stuff. I am telling you this stuff in hindsight because it took me a little while to figure out why she was so disliked so fast. And it was just simple stuff that if somebody had said, hey, you actually have to get in here by about 7, and you actually have to leave your door open. How easy would that have been? She lasted 3 months. This was not a good situation, and we spent all this money finding her. Okay, next thing for the mentee is feeling valued. And a lot of times you'll find this in call centers or service areas or technical areas sometimes where people kind of feel like they're on their own, nobody really cares. Mentoring can help with that. If you can get them in a mentoring pair where somebody does care that they show up to work, that it does matter. I worked with a company that was actually an international company. And what was happening was they were spending a lot of money training people to go to these countries. And then their turnover rate, people lasted maybe a year. And it was, not only was it not a good dollars and cents thing, but it also wasn't good for the people. They left feeling horrible. They were leaving for a reason. It wasn't like they were feeling good and left. And the company was, it starts dragging the company down because it's like a revolving door, and it's like, why can't we keep people here? And so what we did for them was we actually put them, they didn't have enough senior people because the turnover rate was so high. There were just not enough senior people to pair them with. So we did what was called a reciprocal mentoring program, which you can do in like a call center or something like that, where one week the person was the mentor and the next week they were the mentee. And largely what that relationship was all about was just accountability and encouragement. and kept them going. And their turnover rate dropped drastically because somebody cared and somebody was following what was going on and talking with them. And then thirdly, career path. It helps people see that they have a place to go. I will say that in family-owned businesses, and this may or may not be true of yours, but in a family-owned business, which a lot of yours are, the career path thing is hard, especially if you're not the son or daughter of the owner. You know, I mean, you maybe get out to cousins and whatnot, but honestly, it's hard. And so your family may not be able to provide everything you need, so you have to hire in other people, and then they feel like, I have nowhere to go here. I'm here for my job, and I have nowhere to go because I'm not part of the family. Well, what mentoring can do is, first of all, help them feel more a part of your organization. And then it can also show them career path doesn't have to be this way. Career path can be professional development. It can be, there's a lot of things that can happen in a career path. It doesn't have to just be how to get to be the president of an organization. People most often leave organizations because of other people or because they don't see any future. And that's, again, it's not salary. Everybody thinks it's salary. It's not. Salary is like 4th or 5th on the list. But think about how mentoring could actually work on both of those pretty significantly. And again, maybe the career path is you guys provide some money for them to get an advanced degree, or maybe it's, you know, it doesn't have to be what you think it is, but that can all be part of a mentoring relationship. Just some statistics on this. 5 times, how much more likely mentees are to be promoted? Well, think about that. If you are a mentee, you are 5 times more likely to get promoted in your organization. This one will shock you because it shocked me. 6 times. How much more likely mentors are to be promoted? Why do you think that is? Any thoughts? Seriously, I'm throwing it out there. Yeah.
Well-liked by people.
They are well-liked, and they see that you're likable because you're helping people. Definitely. That's one reason. Yeah?
They're adding value to the organization because they're investing in the talent that they have already in place.
Beautiful. Adding value to the organization. 100%. That's so true. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
You're giving of yourself, so you're developing your own character and your own skill set. Because anytime you give of yourself, you develop your skill set.
Gosh, did I hand out cards and tell people what to say? That's awesome. Yes, that's all this good stuff. The other thing I've noticed too is when you're a mentor, you also learn about other areas of your organization. So, you know, you might learn like some of the issues with a call center. There was an issue that this mentor, he was in executive leadership. Their call center turnover was so rapid, and he decided to mentor somebody in that area. And what he found out was that it was a simple policy that was making everybody quit. It was that they had to take, if they needed to do a doctor's appointment or a dentist's appointment, they had to take an entire personal day to do that. And that was, that became really tough for people that had kids, had to maybe just take them to the whatever. And all they had to do, they changed one policy and their turnover rate dropped. But it was all stemmed from this executive leader deciding, I'm going to mentor somebody in that area and find out what's going on. So you can see why. Good stats, though, huh? Makes you kind of motivated to do it. Okay, let's look at for the organization. And again, you guys, I'm giving you lists. My lists actually are this long, but I'm trying to condense them so that for the purposes of presentation. Recruiting and retention. A lot of companies, I know ConocoPhillips does this beautifully. They go into the schools down in Houston, and they go in and find the brightest, the best, say, hey, do you want an internship? We'll even pay you a little bit, not a lot, just a little bit, we'll pay you a little bit, come in, be an intern for a while. They not only find out who really fits in their company, the interns find out if they fit in that company, way before they've made the mistake of job offers and all of that. Now think about this. When those people graduate, where do you think they're going to go? Especially if they've had a good experience. They're going to go to ConocoPhillips. ConocoPhillips has their choice of recruits out of those schools down there. It's amazing. People are fighting to get in there. Retention, we're going to talk about retention in a minute because I think that's one of the key things that does help with business stuff. Leadership succession. I think a lot of times people have this perception of succession as it's like, oh, I'm going to, what is the one person that's going to step into my position? Okay, that's usually what people think. I need somebody to step into my position. What's really great about having a mentoring initiative in your organization is no two people are alike, so someone else stepping into another position is always a little bit tough. In fact, 40% of internal job moves end in failure partly because the two people aren't exactly the same, part of it's because there's no mentoring. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for that. But if instead you've got people constantly trying to train a pool of leaders that they can then pull from, think about that. You've got this pool of leaders now that are getting developed, and now you've got your choice. And you may reorg a little bit. You may have somebody take on this and somebody take on this, and then, I mean, you never know. But that is a really smart way to do it. You can identify, talent and stuff that way. HR departments just aren't big enough. They can't identify the talent that a mentoring initiative can. You've got so many more feet on the ground identifying who can do what. We had a situation where we were looking for an HR professional, and we were interviewing, and all of a sudden one of the gals from our call center at the time came in to interview, and I'm like, I remember, I was rude. I wasn't rude to her, but I was sitting there going, why is she in here? Well, she actually had her master's in human resources development. We didn't know it. She'd just been working because she had to find a job. She became our best HR person we ever had. But we didn't know because we didn't have any way of finding out. If she had been in a mentoring relationship, we would have found that out because somebody would have known that she had that degree. I'm sure it was on her application, but you know what? We just didn't pay attention to it. So leadership succession is a great thing. One last example, Chipotle, which is one of the fastest growing, they're super healthy Mexican food. Are they here in Atlanta? I don't know that. Chipotle? Anyway, they're growing by leaps and bounds, and one of the things that they did was they decided they were hiring, like 75% of their executive leadership was coming from outside of the company, and they said, that doesn't make sense because it's much more motivating if people can kind of see where they can go. And so what they did, they instituted a policy where you had to train someone or a group of people to take over, to do exactly what you did really well before they would ever consider to promote you. And now they're down to, I think it's only 5% outside hires. They hire everybody from within because they're so well trained. They get trained all the way up. And that was a mentoring initiative that they started. Productivity, it just gets better because you're helping everybody. You're helping people learn faster, you're helping people learn about those, like I said, that organizational culture, you're helping people get up and running better, you're having people follow up on goals and things as you're progressing, so everybody is more productive. The thing that happens a lot of times in mentoring programs is they pick like the stars at the top. Oh, we'll mentor, we're gonna pick talent. I've actually been told as a manager to identify talent, and we're gonna pour into those people. The problem with that is that those talented people are also often the most volatile people. And you spend a lot of time training them and putting time into them, and then they go to another company. But if you can get the bulk of your people into mentoring relationships where all of them are concentrating on what goals they have, how they're developing professionally, they know that somebody cares about them because they're meeting with that person regularly, you raise the level of that 80% of the middle of your company, you'll be amazed at what happens. Instead of people going, oh, gosh, I've got an hour left of work. What am I going to do? All right. Or would you rather have people going, oh, man, I only got an hour left. I got to get going. It's a completely different attitude. You want people engaged and caring about what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. If they're in mentoring relationships and they've got goals that matter to them related to your business goals, it's going to transform your company. It is. Reduction of silos, that's like when this division over here doesn't talk to this division. So I've had companies, in fact, I worked with Compassion International, and they had really bad siloed divisions, you know, of things that they were doing. And so they did a mentoring program where they had this division mentor, you know, people from this division mentor people from this division, people from this division, okay, so they were crossing. They found out so many redundancies that it allowed them literally to uncover like 5 people that were duplicating work, and they could take those 5 people and actually put them on new work. It's awesome. But because they hadn't been talking to each other, they didn't know they had these redundancies. And then last but not least, it encourages diversity. Now, your industry is heavily male, and I know you know that. Studies show again and again and again, good studies from Harvard, from the White House, there's a lot of studies that are out recently, that executive teams that contain women, those companies do better. They just do. It's not that women are better than men, but you need both in your executive leadership. That's what it's saying. There are things that women bring to the table that help men out. There's things that men bring to the table that help women out. One of the best ways to get women into the executive ranks is to have men mentor them. It has to happen. There just aren't enough women in the executive leadership teams to do that. And besides, it's beneficial to you as a company to have women in your executive leadership. I mean, if you're interested in the studies, please bring me your card. I've got too many for them. I mean, I did a whole webinar last week on this exact topic, so I don't want to get too off topic. But also other diversity. There was a study done that talked about, was looking at all these diversity programs that have been going on for the last few years. The sad thing is that all those diversity programs have actually reduced the number of African American and other minorities in upper leadership. It's reduced the number of women in leadership. It had the opposite effect. The only ones that worked were the ones that included mentoring at the same time. Now, this is a very smart group, so I'm going to say, why do you think that is? Why do you think it was only the ones that included mentoring that actually worked of those diversity programs? Excuse me? The Old Boy Club is a big part of that. It was. But the thing is that if there were relationships, all of a sudden those barriers were broken down. The old diversity programs basically told you how people were different, but they didn't tell you what to do with that. So instead you're sitting there going, oh yeah, they're that way because they're that. Instead of engaging those people in mentoring relationships, so you started understanding them and having some connections there, and then all of a sudden you start seeing somebody, instead of being so completely different, you start seeing them as being similar. You find things that are the same. I teach a class, actually I haven't taught it for about 2 years, but I give my students this exercise that they have to go do. I say, go out and talk to someone who is different from you. And I want you just to listen to them. I give them kind of a list of questions that are meant to, elicit conversation. And I said, just go find somebody who's so different from you and just sit and listen to them and find out what happens. So, and I won't bore you with all the stories because they're all a lot of cool ones, but one of them was this guy who worked in construction, and there was a Muslim guy that worked on his crew. No one wanted to be around this Muslim guy. I don't know if they didn't know, if they were nervous about it. I don't know why. But for some reason, nobody would even talk to this Muslim guy. And so finally this kid said, you know what, I'm going to go sit and have lunch with him. And so he did. And he sat and had lunch with him for a few weeks in a row and just listened to him. And he came back to class and he's like, Professor, you can't believe this. He goes, you know what, that Muslim guy? He loves his family. He's like shocked. Of course he does. But this kid is like shocked about it. And he goes, and you know what else? He wants to do a good job every day. And I'm like, yeah? And he goes, I know. He goes, I started finding out I have way more in common with him than we have as differences. And that's why I think mentoring encourages diversity, because we start seeing that we actually have similarities. Maybe you as a man are nervous to mentor a woman because you just, that's different. It's much more comfortable to do the old boys club. You're all the same, You can all hang out. You don't have to work that hard. It's easy because you're buddies, right? But honestly, all you have to do is start listening, and you start realizing, gosh, we have more in common than I thought. And we can work together on a really great mentoring relationship. Okay, I'm just going to give you some stats. They're in your book. This is just looking at raw numbers of why you need to do mentoring. 147% is the percentage higher earnings per share for companies with over 9 engaged employees to every 1 actively disengaged employee compared to their competition. So basically, if your employees are engaged, you're going to do better. That makes sense, right? 33%, how much lower the operating margin was for companies with low engagement compared to companies with more engaged employees. And there's some more engagement statistics in your thing. But the point is, you want engaged employees. Okay, so now what do? Well, let's look. 66% was the increase in average engagement capital with peer mentoring done well. There you go. There's one way to do it. I'm not saying it's the only way to engage employees. There's other things you can do, but this is a big one. Okay, 77%. How much more likely people are to stay in their job if they are in a mentoring relationship. Turnover reduced by 20% with mentoring programs in place, but 35% of employees who did not receive regular mentoring look for another job within 12 months. Now again, I realize that retention is an interesting thing in family-owned businesses, but engagement isn't. Just because they're part of your family doesn't mean they're engaged. They may be, they may not be. They may feel like they're forced to be there. They may be frustrated because they can't talk about their supervisor who is their uncle. There are issues in family-owned businesses that mentoring can really help. And I would encourage you to look at doing mentoring. It can be same industry, but maybe outside of your company too. If there's a situation, if you can't do a mentoring initiative, think about, sometimes the family structure is so strong, but you need some outside perspective and help just to move along and become engaged. Just something to think about. Looking at mentoring related to training. So here you are at a conference and you're getting a lot of training here. I'm assuming there's a lot of it going on. I looked at the list of things. Most of them I didn't understand, I have to admit. But anyway, in a study done by Manchester Incorporated, the ROI is typically 6 times the cost when coaching and training is provided to those in management. So this is the thing. When you go home, if you have a mentor that's going to help you apply what you learned here, it's going to be well worth your effort because you're actually going to apply it. Because you've got somebody that's watching you, making sure you're doing it. If you're having trouble applying it, they help you with that. It's incredible how much better it is. Think about how many times you've taken a training and that book or manual sits on a shelf somewhere and doesn't ever, you kind of remember some of the concepts, but not really. And when push comes to shove and you get stressed, you're not going to go to a training manual to remember what you're supposed to do. You're going to react the way you've always reacted because that's what we do as human beings. But I think that, if you can get mentoring as a regular thing, then you're applying those concepts, so then they become part of what you do. They become part of how you do your work. And then that training made a difference. Managerial productivity increased by 88% when mentoring was involved versus only a 24% increase with training alone. So just another study. 80% of training dollars are wasted if follow-up coaching and mentoring are not provided within 30 days. So even if you don't hear anything else from me today, when all this stuff that you're getting trained on while you're here, make sure you got somebody that's kind of following up with you and making sure that you apply what you've learned here, because you're spending money to be here. So make sure those training dollars are used. All right, you guys about to fall asleep on statistics? No, actually you're paying attention, that's good. Confucius said, I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand. Benjamin Franklin said, tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, involve me and I learn. That's the beauty of mentoring, because it's applied learning. It's kind of the bottom line. It's applied learning. And it's somebody who cares that you apply your learning. And somebody who's watching that you do. And it's someone different from you. You can sit there, I mean, I self-manage, y'all self-manage, but it really helps to have an additional person. And I want to tell you a story. Back when my kids were little, I think, let's see, my daughter was like 3 and my son was 2, and then my oldest son was about 8. And there's this restaurant in Denver, that's where I'm from, that's called Casa Bonita. Casa Bonita is one of those places that children love and parents hate. You know the kind, with all the toys and games, and you spend money, 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 you know, I mean, it's just, ugh. But the kids loved it, and so, true to form, as soon as the wallet gave out, we decided it was time to leave. So, I'm looking at my watch and going, man, we stayed a little bit too long, and I better take the shortcut back home, because I need to get home. Now, the shortcut was on a street called Colfax. And Colfax in Denver, at that time, was not the best street. It was a little dicey. We had a real gang problem back then, a real bad one. And Colfax was just not a street that you typically would drive on, at least not the full length of it. But I was in a really big hurry. And I was driving my minivan. They're like tanks, aren't they? Kind of like tanks, you know? You're driving along. It's awesome. So I'm going along, and I'm going, okay. And I'm starting to notice that, you know, Colfax has gotten a little scarier than the last time I drove down it. You know, I'm starting to notice lots of boarded up buildings here and there. Driving along again, I'm going, okay, there's fewer and fewer people now on the street. And but I'm in my minivan, I'm okay. I'm in my tank. So I see up in the distance that there's this group of men, and they have their colors on, okay? So they're definitely gang members. And so I'm seeing them, and I'm like, okay, but I'm in my minivan, I'm okay. And then all of a sudden, bang, my tire blows. I can barely get my minivan to the side of the road. And I look up, and I see they have just seen, it was hard to miss, I mean, it was pretty loud. And I see that they have seen what has happened. And I'm sitting there looking. There's no one around. There's nowhere to go. And believe it or not, this is before cell phones, okay? So I didn't have one. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I mean, I'm terrified. And they start to walk towards the van. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I can grab like one kid under each arm, but the 8-year-old, what do I do? And by the way, if I start running somewhere, I don't have a place to run to. There's no place to go. And so I'm sitting there going, I mean, you know how just the blood drains from your entire body. I'm like, I'm going to be dead here, and so are my kids. And it was for some stupid thing, because I was trying to get back before some deadline. All of a sudden, there's a knock on the window. And I look out, and the person standing outside the window is so incredibly large that I can't actually see his whole face without kind of looking up like this. And I notice that this man is horribly scarred. He's actually missing an eye, and he has a big scar on his face like this, and he's missing at least 2 fingers off of his hands. Big, big, meaty hands. And he's motioning for me to roll my window down. I'm sitting there thinking, well, he's big enough he could just put his fist through my window, and then I'd have glass all over me. So I guess I'll roll the window down. So I roll down the window, and he says, I'll fix your flat for $5. I was like, what? He's like, yeah. He goes, and if you don't have the $5, I'll fix it anyway. And I said, oh my goodness. I don't know how to fix a flat tire. I'm embarrassed to say that. I didn't then, and I still don't know how to fix a flat tire. I have AAA. So I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. You know, so he kind of lumbers to the back of the minivan, and he's opening up the back of the minivan and getting the jack out and getting the spare tire out and changing my tire. And I've noticed that that group of men has actually stopped, and they're kind of staring at what's going on here. So I'm sitting there going, oh my goodness, this is so great. This is so great. But then I remembered I got to give him some money. Well, where was I? I was at the stupid place where I spent all my money, you know? So I'm sitting there going, well, maybe I've got to either, I'm digging in the seats, you know, and I'm finding a lot of Cheerios, but not a lot of coins. And I'm sitting there going, where, you know, what am I going to do? I've got to give this man something. He's literally saving my life. And so something told me to just look in my purse one more time. And I looked, and hidden on the side in a pocket that I hadn't looked in was $50. And so when he lumbered back up to the window, and he goes, well, ma'am, it's all done. And I said, oh my goodness. I said, here, and I handed him the $50. And he had a tear that kind of formed in the corner of his eye, and he goes, thank you. He said, you know, he said, I got up this morning and I prayed that I would find a way to feed my family. And he goes, I can't thank you enough for this money. And I said, I can't thank you enough for saving my family's life. If I had seen that man on the street, I certainly would have been afraid of him, and I definitely wouldn't have thought he had anything to offer me. I wouldn't have engaged with him. I would have just thought he was a scary, mean person, because honestly, this scar made him look kind of like he was frowning. I tell you this story because I want you to realize that everyone has something that you can learn from them. Not just one thing, many things. There are a lot of things that you can learn from people, and you may not know it until you have that conversation with him or her. But people have, even if it's just a different perspective, everyone has something you can learn from them. And that's a very basic thing that I believe about mentoring, that you can learn something from anyone for a period of time. You don't have to be best friends with the person you're in a mentoring relationship with. You just have to respect them and have a learning attitude. And that mentoring relationship will work because of your attitude. The second thing is, you know, sometimes you have to be asked to kind of look for that hidden thing that you can give. In this illustration, it was money. But oftentimes, it takes someone else to say, hey, have you ever thought of trying this? Hey, do you know how to do X? Have you ever, you know, I've seen your talent here. Have you thought about trying this other thing? To go back to what you've already looked at, it's that new perspective, and find that new thing that you have to offer. Again, in my case, it was money. But a lot of times, it's a talent, it's a gift, it's something that maybe you didn't know about. A mentor can help you do that. And that the fact that people are different is the beauty of why mentoring works so well. If we can have that learning attitude, we become better people every day. So I have this picture of kind of all kinds of different people. I want you to start thinking about, in your personal life and your professional life, what are some things you want to learn? Doesn't have to just be, you know, how to do better in something, but I want you to take some time and really think about that. You know, what is there that you can learn? That relationship of that learning moment will make you a better person, and it will help the other person as well. When we learn and respect each other, learn from and respect each other, a beautiful thing happens. You will notice, if you can get mentoring going in your organizations, you will notice that your culture becomes kinder and friendlier. I mean, again, I know a lot of you are family owned, but that doesn't mean that you don't work hard and get stressed and all of the things that happen at work. So think about what it is that you want to learn. And I'm going to give you 6 categories of places where you might be able to learn. I call these the 6 mentoring relationships. The first is the formal mentor, and that's kind of what I've been talking about a lot, and I'll talk about at the end when we talk about the 5 skills of mentoring. But a formal mentor is one where you have structure. You're meeting with them regularly. You're, you have goals that you've set. They're holding you accountable. They're encouraging you along as you're doing those goals. That's what a formal mentor is. I think everyone should have at least one, because that's what supercharges your growth, And if you have one, even if you feel like, oh, I'm too old, I don't need to learn anything, stay young. This is how you stay young, is you mentor or you get mentored. It's great. The formal mentor is very effective because it does help you really move things along. So I always encourage everybody to have a formal mentor. But I also encourage everybody to have an informal mentor. More than one. Who are you learning stuff from? Who are you, just little things. Maybe somebody's really good at budgeting quickly. Have them get in an informal relationship with them. Meet with them 3 times and learn how to budget quickly. I have a desperate need for sales in my company. And so right now I can't really hire a big-time salesperson. So I found this guy who is good at sales. And I said, can I meet with you 3 times? And I would love to have you teach me, sales best practices one time. Best ways to network one time, and I forget what the 3rd one was. How to close. Okay, these are the 3 things I want to learn from you. And he's doing it, and he's helping me a lot right now because I need the help. Yeah.
Just for clarification, what did you tell him you were giving him? This is someone who has something to offer, that's clear.
Mm-hmm.
Why would he do it?
Because he's a good guy and he's my friend. Yeah, it was a friend. You're right. It wasn't some random person that I didn't know. Now, I will tell you, I had him on my radio show a few times, so I had built up some goodwill with him. Yeah. But for 3 times, he was willing to do that. Yes. Well, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, and he and I have worked together a lot. We work on best practices. We do online courseware and stuff. We both do, so we've kind of helped each other out. So you're right, that is an ongoing relationship. But I did have a situation where, let's see, I'm trying to think, she actually had something to gain from it. The lady that I wanted to learn better public speaking skills from, I did the same thing, was real specific. And please don't blame her for my performance today. But she, I knew I was going to have to start speaking a lot in front of people. And so I observed her, took the time to really look at what she was doing. And so I noticed that she was great at taking somebody from one place, and then by the end of her talk, they were like, ready to go do whatever it is she was telling them to do. And so I thought that was really a great talent. And then she also was really good at telling a story. She knew how to tell a story that wasn't boring. And so I went up to her and I said, would you be willing to mentor me in those 2 things? And she stared at me for a second, and I was like, uh-oh, guess not. But she said, you know what, Liz? She goes, I will. She didn't know me. I worked for her company, though. So I guess ultimately there was a benefit there. But she said, I will, and I'll tell you why. Because you came up to me, and the fact that you had observed me enough to tell me exactly what you wanted to learn tells me you're not going to waste my time. And she said, I also can do the 2 things you asked of me. She said, I've had people come up and just go, will you mentor me? Worst thing you can do. Most people don't know what that means. It's frightening. It's a frightening thing to be asked. What? Are they asking me to be their best friend for 8 years? I don't know what this looks like, And so, so she said that when it was real specific, she said, yeah. She goes, I will do that for you for 6 months. And she did. I have to tell you just another quick story about that whole, will you mentor me thing. I find that mentors are, again, more willing if you can be specific and you've observed them. A lot of times mentors will say no just because they don't know what you're asking or what's involved. And I did a training down at NASA with truly rocket scientists, okay? So these guys, it was funny because I go down there and this guy who brought me down there, he's like, oh my gosh. He goes, you don't know who's in that room. Oh, you don't know, in that room, it's all the guys. And I'm like, who are the guys? But like the guys, I guess, that did all the fancy, all the rocket scientist stuff that's like put people on the moon and everything. And so he was like, I was like, you have got to calm down because you're freaking me out. But I go inside and we are with this long table with all these guys with white hair, like you picture rocket scientists, super smart. I mean, you can almost see the brain cells like just popping off their heads. And then around the edge were all these young people that were, I guess, going to be the mentees. And so I did the training, the 5 skills you'll see at the end. And they came up and they're like, oh my goodness, we can do this now. I mean, these 2 gentlemen, they said, we were really nervous because we didn't know what we were supposed to do in these meetings. What are we, we just have them supposed to, like, how do I get my knowledge, give them to that? I mean, they just were like, we didn't know what was supposed to happen. So they were very appreciative of just having a very simple process to have a successful mentoring relationship. Okay, the next thing is coach. Yikes, running out of time. Okay, so the coach is a person that usually is focused on skills. A lot of times you can bring a coach in from outside. Maybe you need to get somebody's skills up to a certain level. There's nobody in your organization that can do it. You bring in a coach. Mentoring is a little bit more of takes more of your life into account. It's not based on just a skill. It's actually based on personal improvement and learning. So mentoring is a little deeper, a little more interactive and intense. Supervisors should all mentor. So that's why they're up there. But again, I would suggest that you have a mentor outside of your supervisory relationship because supervisors, when push comes to shove, they care about the results of your team. And you're just one piece of those results. And that's what they're supposed to do. That's what they're paid to do. So we can't be too hard on them because they're doing what they're supposed to do. But you need somebody outside of that if you really want to grow personally and really become, professionally what you want to become, because your supervisor just can't do it all. Leaders mentor you. If you are the leader of your organization, you are mentoring people whether you want to or not. And it may be good or it may be bad, but you're mentoring them in things. Some leaders mentor in how not to act, so, unintentionally. But hopefully, but it's just something to keep in mind. You are mentoring people by virtue of your leadership position. They are looking to you. So keep that in mind. And then the last one is sponsorship. And that's something that I would say, again, in the propane world, I think sponsorship by some men of some women to help women get into those leadership positions like we talked about. In some cases, there's just no other way to do it because there aren't women in those leadership positions. So men have to step up and do that. What sponsoring does is sponsoring is just highlighting the skills and strengths of another person. And it's helping them gain access to opportunities. So that's what sponsoring is. So for instance, I had a gal who said early on in my career, she said, I'll let you co-write an article with me. She was a well-published author. And so I got my name on her well-published article. It was awesome. So I now had, I all of a sudden had this article that was, well-published. So there are just ways you can do that. You can help them gain entry into meetings, into positions, into, there's a lot of things you can do to sponsor. Okay, so what is mentoring? Well, it's a brain to pick, an ear to listen, and a push in the right direction. I think that's actually the better. The other one's a little more technical, little definition, but really, it's a brain to pick. You want somebody else's perspective. And yes, it's great if they're really wise in the area you're trying to learn, like with my public speaking person. But I also had, I've had a mentor that she wasn't necessarily wiser in a certain area that I wanted. She just held me accountable to what I needed to do. And she was very, very helpful. So a brain to pick, she gave me good perspectives. An ear to listen. Remember, mentors, you're not just there to talk about what you did well. You're there actually to listen and hear what's going on and help that person improve. and then a push in the right direction. So it's that shove. It's that, okay, somebody cares that I'm doing the exercises I'm supposed to do. Somebody cares that that's going to happen. So that's what it is. The other is, I'll read it. It's a reciprocal and collaborative learning relationship between two or more people who share mutual accountability for helping a mentee work towards integrated personal, spiritual, professional development and work synergistically towards organizational goals. So basically, it's just that whole, it's basically what the first thing says. It's that ear, it's that brain to pick, the ear to listen, and a push in the right direction. Okay, so looking at a program, if you want to do this, and again, this is something that my company does all the time, but we've kind of got it down to a science. But basically, if you are looking at doing an initiative, you're going to want to, this is not in your thing. We can get you these, though, can't we, somehow? Get them access to this. If you want them, we'll get you this stuff. It's pretty basic. You want to prepare for the program. You want to get your pairings together. You're going to want to figure out how to and pairings will depend on the goals of your program. So you look like you're about to ask a question, no?
Yeah, I'm really interested in the practical side of things.
Good.
Question, even before you talk about preparation, and you mentioned before about numbers at the top, so leaders and numbers of groups, if you want to call them.
Mm-hmm.
If you only have 5 people in a position of leadership, you have 50 employees, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Are you picking and choosing people? I mean, I've seen this work and fail, so that's why I'm interested in the specifics.
No, in that situation, I would do something more of a reciprocal program initiative where you're actually pairing people who are on the same level. You're going to do it a little bit differently. Okay, so what are the goals of that program? What are you trying to accomplish? Is it personal development or? Oh.
I've seen too many fail. The only ones that I've ever worked with have been ones where people weren't successful.
Oh dear. Okay.
I'm here and I'm interested.
Good. Yeah, because actually, I've had a lot of success. So basically, the pairing part is an important part because you've got to decide what the goals of your program are. Let me give you some examples. I gave you the one of the Compassion International one where they were definitely trying to reduce those silos. That was their goal. So the pairings were across relational lines. The things that those pairs did were related to business and finding out what each other's divisions were doing. So it was very reciprocal. A lot of what they did was, again, they would mentor 1 week or mentee 1 week. You can do it that way, or you can still pair people and have them just be the mentor and be the mentee, and then get them in another relationship where they're something else if you want. But the reciprocal thing works really well actually in your situation because the 2 biggest strengths of mentoring are the accountability and the encouragement. That's the 2 main things that why mentoring is successful, is accountability and encouragement. Believe it or not, it's not always the learning that happens. That happens some, but you don't want to create a mini-me, okay? We're not creating clones here. And so you're not, as a mentor can never completely fulfill everything that mentee needs. So if you realize that and you say, okay, what you do instead as a mentor is say, oh, okay, so you want to learn how to budget better. Well, let's get you into 2 meetings with Joe. And you want to learn how to work with conflict. Well, I can role play that with you, but let's go through Crucial Conversations, the book, together. Let's look at that, and we'll figure out how to work through conflict together. Okay? So the learning piece, this is, I think, one of the biggest misconceptions. Yes, there are certain times, like I said with the public speaker, definitely had some things I wanted to learn from her. But you can set up mentoring situations, and that's the thing. I think when you get it to where mentoring is only seen as for the really special people, or when it's seen as really the bad people that need help, okay, neither is very good. Mentoring should be for everybody, and have everybody do that. Good question, though. Do you feel like that I answered it well enough? We can talk more. Yeah, okay, yeah, we can talk more or whatever. So as you're preparing for the program, that's part of it. You want to think about, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to get more engaged employees? Well, then you actually have to include all your employees in it. If you really want that engagement to go up, you actually need to feel like oh wow, we're all part of this, not just the fancy people at the top. It actually matters that I am here and I am a part of this. Did you have a question? Okay. Then you're going to set expectations. And again, I have kind of a set of things. You know, you're going to talk about confidentiality. You're going to talk about how long you're going to meet. You're going to talk about where you're going to meet. You're going to talk about all of those kinds of things that are pretty important. Set those expectations up front. Make sure you have an end date. Very important, because mentoring programs become very bad when they just like go on forever and fizzle at the end, and then everybody has a bad feeling about them. Whereas if you know, man, I'm going for 6 months, I got this 6-month mentoring relationship, I can do 6 months. You can do anything for 6 months. Trust me, you can. So I think, you know, if you have that end date, I love mentoring. I do, and I love being mentored, but I like having an end date because it's work. It is some work. You know, it's like it takes time and it takes effort. And when I know, man, we're cruising towards this date and we got these goals we're going to accomplish, it's very energizing and it goes forward. If you just are like, yeah, will you mentor me? First of all, I told you why that's bad. And then you're kind of like you sort of meet sometimes, and then you both sort of cancel out on each other whenever, and then people get their feelings hurt. And then maybe they don't really have good solid goals, so then what ends up happening in their mentoring meetings is they're just complaining about what's going on in the company. So it really just becomes a bitch session instead of something positive. Those programs are a disaster. And I, like you, have come across so many of them. It's so funny because I'll talk to people, I go, well, you know, what do you think of mentoring? I don't know. Well, tell me, you know, what happened? And I find out there was no setting expectations, there was no preparation, there was no training, there was no, and again, you'll see the training, I train on these 5 skills. That does it. These 5 skills, which you're going to see in just a minute, they're not rocket science at all, but they have worked all over the world. Because what you do is you pair the people up, you pair them based on the goals of the program, and you tell people, like I just said, you say, you know what, you can do anything for 6 months, you can learn something from anybody. Teach people to have a learning stance. You know, when somebody starts irritating you, instead of going, why do they do it that way? You say, why do they do it that way? Totally different. Takes the anger out of it. Try that the next time. Next time you get frustrated with somebody, just try to step back and do the learning thing instead of the irritation thing. So instead of, what made you start it that way? You know, go, what made you start it that way? Totally different. I'm telling you guys, just try it. It works so well. I've really reduced my road rage, you know, and a lot of other things because I have this learning stance. I try to figure out, why did they just cut me off without saying anything, or, you know? Okay, so preparing for the program, setting expectations, keeping up momentum, and then you want to finish well. And like I said, finish. So that means doing some kind of an evaluation of what you've done so you feel good about what you've accomplished, and actually having an end date. And let's see. You know, we're not going to be able to do the little videos, unfortunately. Okay, ran out of time. So let me just give you the 5 skills. They are listening, building trust, inspiring, setting goals, and giving feedback. Now we'll go through each one of these here so you can see it. But these are the 5 skills that have worked. This is the thing. When mentoring pairs come to me and they go, I'm just not getting along with my mentoring pair. I want a new mentoring partner. This isn't working. And I'll say, okay, if you can tell me that you both are still listening to each other, really listening to each other, if you can tell me that you're still doing things to build trust and that you haven't done anything to break trust, okay, and if you've broken trust, you need to talk about that and figure out what happened, that you're still inspiring each other, make sure you're still inspiring each other, I'll tell you what that looks like, that your goals are still appropriate, you've looked at them, they're still relevant, they're still achievable, they still look like good goals, and that you're still giving the feedback, the positive stuff, you're making sure you're taking the time to give the positive feedback, and you make sure you're taking the time to give the corrective feedback. if you can come back to me and tell me you're honestly doing those 5 things, I'll let you guys stop your pairing, you know? They're not doing one of those things. They always go back and they work it out. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, we are adults here, and I know we don't always act like adults, but honestly, if you do those 5 things, your mentor pairing will work. It will. Very bold of me to say it, but it's true. The first one is listening. God, I just wish we could do those, but I think we don't have time. Okay. So listening, we are a country of horrible listeners. We're actually a world of horrible listeners, although some cultures are better at it than others. But listening is it's just something we don't do well unless we're intentional about it. So picture, okay, you really have something so important to tell somebody, and you come in and you're thinking, okay, I really, really want to tell them this thing. What can they do that will drive you nuts? What are some things? Yeah. Talk, okay? Just not listen, talk instead, okay? What else? Really just, seriously? Yeah.
Look away, no eye contact.
No eye contact, or I've had the other with the drilling eye contact. You know, it's just like too much. Okay, so appropriate eye contact is very good. What else? Other things that would just drive you nuts. Too busy to listen. And yeah, and I think that looking away too, like they're kind of, yeah, okay, yeah, you know. You realize they really aren't listening at all. Ooh, thank you. Cell phone. You guys, there was a time when we didn't have cell phones. I remind people of this. You can actually put your cell phone away for the half hour you're meeting with your mentor. You can. It's okay. What else? Listening things that just... Interruptions. Finishing sentences. Anyway, we know how to be good listeners. We just forget how. So one of the things I love to challenge people with is next time you're with somebody, and it's actually a thing I make people actually practice when I do a full training, is sit and listen to somebody and just make a conscious effort to do this once a day, where you sit and listen to somebody and you add no new content, okay? That means you don't say, oh, I know that happened to me too, or yeah, that's it. No new content of your own. Your story actually can wait. And believe me, I love telling stories, you can tell. But I have to sit there and go, okay, I am listening to this person and I'm going to give them this gift. And it is a gift. And that's another thing why mentoring really makes people feel valued. Because you listen and give them that time. And you're not about talking about you. Believe me, it's actually, there's a good part of it. You're not always trying to think of the next cool thing to say. You actually just listen and say, oh, tell me more about that. Really? And how did that make you feel? You know, it's easy. But it takes intentionality. And it takes a humbling of ourselves to really hear what the other person is saying instead of always wanting to add our own story or one-up. I have people that want to one-up you all the time. It's so frustrating. Seriously, can you just listen to my story? Because by the way, when that happens, you've just negated everything that person has just said with your one-upness. Totally. Okay, next is building trust. Again, you know, Stephen Covey talks about an emotional bank account where you have to put in things before you can take them out, and that's how you build trust. And so building trust is doing things like spending time together, maintaining confidentiality, you know, accomplishing goals together, sharing stories. That's how you build trust. Next is inspiring. So I sometimes have to kind of give this as an example because people don't understand, well, what's the difference between inspiring and positive feedback? Positive feedback is telling people specifically what they did well. Inspiring is, okay, so for the mentor, you can inspire 2 ways. As a mentor, first of all, you can inspire by just your life and you know, some of the accomplishments you've had. That's great. The other way that you can inspire is by telling the mentee that you believe in them. And be specific, because personal growth is hard work. It's not easy. And so if you can go to the person and say, you know what, I know that you can get through this goal. I know you can because I have watched you do it. I have watched you maintain that, go through that conflict with your cubicle person. I've watched you do that, and you know what? You handled that with such grace. I know that you can keep going. I know that you can. It's believing in them. Or you know what? I see such a future in you. I do. I know that you are going to do something really great with your life. And I know that because I've watched you do X, Y, and Z, and I know you can do it. It's just taking the time to remind them that you're behind them. And then for the mentee, you need to inspire too. So as a mentee, you're going to inspire by, first of all, doing what you're supposed to be doing. That means accomplishing your goals, doing the work that you're given. There's nothing more demotivating to a mentor is giving somebody or helping somebody come up with a lot of goals and then nothing ever gets done week after week. Yeah, that's not worth my time. That's not inspiring. And then the second thing is you say, hey, you know what? Thank you for taking the time. I know that it's not easy for you to take this half hour every other week, but you know what? I appreciate you for doing it. Thank you for doing that. And don't think I take it for granted because I don't. And I have learned this from you or that from you and start getting specific. So that's what inspiring is. Next is setting goals, and hopefully you guys know a little bit about that. Often in a training I'll go how to set really good SMART goals is typically what people use. I mean it's, you know, that they can be smart, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So setting good goals, I will tell you where I see people falter the most in setting goals is either the goal is not relevant or it is not achievable. So it's either too hard or too difficult, or too hard or too easy, or it's not relevant. And I see this happen the most when a mentor, the goal ends up being what the mentor thinks the goal should be instead of what the mentee thinks the goal should be. It needs to matter to the mentee. If it doesn't matter to the mentee, they're not going to get it done. So if you start noticing your mentees dragging their feet, or if you notice you're dragging your feet, you're the mentee, go, okay, something's going on here. This isn't relevant to me. Something about this goal just doesn't matter, and I don't care about accomplishing it, and that's why I'm not getting it done. Or check and see, is it too hard? Or it can be too easy. That's the other thing. You keep procrastinating because you know you can do it tomorrow. So those are the two areas. Finally, we'll conclude with this last one of giving feedback. I wonder if can you help me get the last one up here? Because the last one will be good. I have little scenarios for each of these, but they take a little bit of time. So, because we can get out of that completely and just go to the... These are my friends Colin and Dave, and so they tried to show you how not to do things. Yeah, that's it. There we go.
I noticed the evaluation of the new product that I just did, and I wondered, as my line manager, whether you could give me a few things, positive comments that you thought about my project.
Well, probably pretty much, across the board. The next time you have an idea, just let it pass.
Pardon?
Well, the whole idea was just disaster from the very beginning.
Well, they can hear it.
I mean, the words were spelled upside down the first run. Then when we got the second, and all the machinery calibrated.
Yeah, and I appreciate it, but we did fix it. I mean, it took us a while.
Yeah, you fixed it. But the problem is we lost half the product going down the line into the trucks.
Well, I totally understand. I understand about that, but but overall, you felt it was. Overall, you felt it was something that would really make this company move forward.
I don't think so. I don't think anybody's going to buy it.
Really?
To be honest with you, and I think it's all come down to. It says here that you went to MIT, and I don't get that from your performance.
Well, I did, and then I went to Harvard for my postgraduate.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll have to mark that down because that's got to be a first.
What?
No, that's okay. And there's another thing I need to talk to you about. It's the way that you talk to the other employees. The way you conduct yourself and the way you handle this project.
You were happy with that?
No, I don't think so. I think the guy at the furthest down position could probably do what you do.
Oh. I mean, was there anything positive that came out of it?
Yeah, you're in my office and not on the line.
Okay, well, obviously that's just the most negative feedback with no room for improvement, no encouragement to improve, nothing. It was just everything he'd done wrong, Nothing. So basically, in giving feedback, you're going to want to be specific. You're going to want to make sure you're concentrating on actions that they're doing and instead of them as a person. You know, if you tell somebody that they're horrible, they are horrible, they can't do anything about that because they are horrible. So there is nothing, or they're worthless, or they're, you know, terrible at this. I mean, you have just now given them no room to move and no way to improve. The other thing that I will encourage you to do is not say good job to people, which I know you're, well, but that's encouraging, except it's not really, because they don't know what they did well. Good job makes you feel good for about this long, and then you're like, okay, and then you forget about it. But if somebody instead comes up to you and say, hey, you know what? When you gave that presentation, you were doing such a good job of engaging the whole audience, and you, I noticed it was so organized, I really could follow what you were saying, and you know, I came away with some good takeaways. That's awesome. That's different than good job, if that makes sense. So anyway, those 5 skills, you practice them in your mentoring relationships, they will work, I promise. And I think we are out of time. If you have any questions, please feel free to come up and talk to me afterwards. I love this stuff, in case you can't tell, so I will talk to anybody about it for any length of time. So anyway, thank you very much. Did you need to say anything? Oh.
I just want to thank our sponsors one more time, AmeriGas and Apex Energy, who will make the video available. If you're a member of Women in Propane, the video will be posted on our LinkedIn site, so you can have access to review this very important
That was so
material.
weird. I don't know
Thank
where
you
it
to
went.
Dr. Selzer. Thank you to all of you for participating.
So nice.
Women in Propane has identified an industry-wide mentoring program as its identifying project, and today's program certainly gave us a boost in the right direction. And I would be remiss if I did not refer you to pages 29 and 30 of your schedule, which identifies the other Women in Propane programs that will be happening during your time here. We would love to have you join the council, and we would certainly love to have you join our roundtable discussion tomorrow on work-life balance, and not least, but last, our network reception, where we will be hosting opportunities to discuss with other industry members the exciting things you've learned today and throughout the expo. So thank you all.